Hi everyone, I'm Danica and Vista, and today we will about to learn the topic attitudes to error and correction and responding to errors.
Few people like being wrong, and yet there seems to be no way of learning a language without being wrong a lot of time. Not many people like being corrected either. Yet, to leave mistakes uncorrected flies in the face of intuitions and expectation of teachers and students alike. Mistakes and errors are an inevitable side effect of all learning, and yet so much learning time is spent denying or correcting them. Attitudes to error and correction vary not only among teachers but also among students. Attitudes to error run deep and lie at the heart of teachers' intuitions about language learning. Many people still believe that errors are contagious and that learners are at risk of catching the errors other learners make. It is often this fear of error and infection that underlies many students to dislike of fair or group work. On the other hand, many teachers believe that to correct error is a form of interference, especially in fluency activities. But some teachers go further and argue that correction of any sort creates a judgmental and stressful classroom atmosphere and should be avoided. These different attitudes find an echo in the shifts of thinking that have taken place amongst researchers and materials writers. According to recent thinking, sees error as the evidence of development process rather than the result of bad habit information. In short, errors makes the students learn from their mistakes and develop it. If there is no errors, there will be no development process.
Here is a selection. The student should be trained to learn by making as few mistakes as possible. He must be trained to adopt correct learning habits right from the start. Next, getting things wrong is only good practice in getting things wrong. Next, provided students communicate effectively, they should not be given a sense of failure because they make mistakes. From Project English 2 Teacher's Book by Hutchison, don't expect learners to go straight from ignorance to knowledge. Learning takes time and is not achieved in one go. Be prepared to accept partial learning as an important stage on the way to full learning. From Blueprint Intermediate Teacher's Book by Abs and Freeburn. Making mistake is an important and positive part of learning a language. Only by experimenting with the language and receiving feedback can students begin to work out how the language works. Certainly, current methodology is much more tolerant of error, but the tide may be turning yet again. Studies learners whose language development has fossilized, that is, it has stopped at point well short of the target, suggest that lack of negative feedback may have been a factor. Negative feedback is simply indicating no. You can say that when a learner makes an error. On the other hand, positive feedback is when learners told when they are right. If the learners get positive messages, it may be the case that there is no incentive to restrict their mental grammar. The restructuring mechanism closed down, hence it is now generally accepted that a focus on form, not just on meaning, is necessary in order to guard against facilization. A focus on form includes giving learners clear messages about their errors. What option has the teacher got when faced with a student's error? Let's imagine that in the course of a classroom activity, a student has been describing a person's appearance and said he has a long hair. Here are some of the possible responses that a teacher might consider. First, no. This is clearly negative feedback, but it offers the students no clue as to what was wrong. The teacher may be assuming that the student has simply made a slip under pressure and doesn't represent lack of knowledge of the rule. There are also other ways of signaling that a mistake has been made without saying no, just like facial expression, shake of head, and etc. might work as well. Next, he has a long hair. This is a correction in the strictest sense of the word. The teacher simply repairs the student's utterance and reminding the learners not to focus only on meaning at the expense form. Third response, no article. The teacher's move is directed at pinpointing the kind of error the student has made in order to prompt self-correction, and if it fails, per correction or when learners correct each other. It is where meta-language, the use of grammatical terminology, comes in handy. Words like article, preposition, verb, tense, and many more. Next response, no, anyone, unambiguous feedback signal plus an invitation for peer correction. By excluding the option of self-correction, however, the teacher risks humiliating the original students. Perhaps the teacher knows the students well enough to rule out self-correction for his error. Next response, he has. In other words, the teacher is replaying the student's utterance up to the point where the error occurred, with a view to isolate the error as a clue for self-correction. This technique can be reinforced by finger coding, where the teacher marks out which word on her finger, indicating with her finger the part of the phrase or sentence that needs repair. Another response, he has a long hair. Another common teacher strategy is to echo the mistake but with a quizzical intonation. It is perhaps less threatening than saying no, but often learners fail to interpret that this is an invitation to self-correct and think that teacher is simply questioning the truth of what they have said. Next, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Variation on this response includes sorry, you what? Excuse me, etc. These are known as clarification requests and of course occur frequently in real conversation. As a correction device, they signal to the student that the meaning of their message is unclear. It is therefore a more friendly way of signaling a mistake. Research suggests that when learners recast their message after receiving a clarification request, it usually tends to improve despite their not having told explicitly that mistake has been made. Another response, just one, like this, draws bald man with one long hair. The teacher has pretended to interpret the student's utterance literally in order to show the students the unintended effects of the error. Another one, a long hair is just one single hair, like you find in your soup. For the hair on your head, you wouldn't use an article. He has a long hair. The teacher uses error to make an impromptu teaching point. This is an example of reactive teaching where instruction is in response to students' errors rather than trying to preempt them. Another, oh, he has a long hair, has he? This technique is sometimes called reformulation. It's an example of covert feedback disguised as a conversational aside. Typically, this is the way parents seem to correct their children by offering an expanded version of the child's utterance. Some theorists argue that this expansion and reformulation help provide a temporary scaffold for the child's developing language competence. Scaffold or scaffolding is breaking up the learning into chunks and providing a tool or structure with each chunk. The problem is that learners may simply not recognize the intention nor notice the difference between their utterance and the teacher's reformulation. Good, strange, but it is in fact a very common way that the teachers provide feedback on students' production, especially in activities where the focus is more on meaning than a form. The intention behind the feedback, good or any of its alternatives such as okay, is to acknowledge the student's contribution, but if construed as a positive feedback, it may lull learners into a false sense of security and worse initiate the process of fossilization. teacher says nothing but writes down error for future reference. The intention here is to postpone the feedback so as not to disrupt the flow of talk, but deals with errors later. The correction in this context might be inappropriate. Nevertheless, there are some grounds to believe the most effective feedback is that which occurs in what we are called the real operation condition. That is when the learners using language communicatively. To sum it up, then learners' errors offer the teacher a rich source of data with which to monitor learning. At the same time, learners need feedback on their production. This suggests that teachers should deal with at least some of the errors that arise. To do this, they have a wide range of feedback options available. The choice of feedback strategy will depend on factors as the type of error. Does it have a major effect on communication? Is this one that the learner could probably self-repair? The type of activity. It is the focus of the activity more on form or on meaning. If the latter, it is probably best to correct without interfering too much with the flow of communication. The type of learner. Will the learner be discouraged or humiliated by correction? Alternatively, will the teamer feel shortchanged if there is no correction?